Welcome to Comics in the Making. My name is Ryan Holgerson. I'm the creator of Slackmatic, and I'm joined, as always, by Levi Erickson, the creator of The Big. Levi, how's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. It is beautiful today. Hard to
There we
be
go again.
inside, but
There
but
we go again.
but
Let's
I'm
talk
talking
about the
about
weather,
comics.
guys.
No, I want to go ride my skateboard.
Oh, I don't know.
Let's
It's
get through
so
this. I know you got some stuff on your mind that you want to
really
say.
fucking hot.
Is this one going to be political?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Um, I mean, well, I don't know, maybe. But I wanted to talk about the positives of staying a small creator. And I don't mean like, oh, I always want to stay small, but I want to talk about the positives of currently being a small creator
Yep.
and the things that we sometimes don't think about as positives when we're looking at our art and we're looking at our career in art.
Yeah.
So what I want to bring up first is I think maybe what our impressions are of being a full-time, I'm making a living from art, and I think a lot of times creators have the idea that there's a light switch that flips.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 second you're a small time guy trying to get your stuff out there,
Yep.
and all of a sudden you get your big break.
That's all
And
it takes. I just need that
I
one
just
big
need,
break, man.
I just need this many people to look at me,
If my band opens for Bad Religion,
yeah,
it's well, there's no Warped Tour anymore. I don't, but
yeah,
yeah, it's just Warped Tour from now on.
right, right. um
None of that
I
shit's
just
cracked
need
up.
that, I just need that break, and then I'm gonna make it. When the reality is, although we can point at certain artists that have certainly gotten this,
Mm-hmm.
when we look at those numbers, we're looking at something on the scale of like a lottery.
Oh, 100%.
So the vast majority of people that are making a living at art or doing comics for a living, it is still a struggle. And you're not looking at these people and going, they're multimillionaires and stuff like that.
No.
And so I wanted to go through some of what's stressful. And this isn't necessarily coming from me, but I can add some anecdotes about doing, let's say, freelance work and stuff like that. So one, freelance work in general is not regular, or it's not always regular.
Right, especially in today's like landscape.
Yeah. So
In terms of circulation, in terms of
mhm,
opportunities, if you are a very dependable, uh, multifaceted, you know, illustrator, artist, creator, Al Milgrom comes to mind, you know,
mhm,
because go through probably a 20-year span of Marvel Comics and
mhm,
and find somewhere where he wasn't. You know what I mean?
right.
And
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to say that he never stood out, that he just faded and was someone that could just blend into the work. Um, I mean, he was amazing on the page and
Well,
with the word. But I always, when I was younger, I looked towards someone like him because I wanted to be that guy at Marvel Comics that
but
they
that's
could bring
that's
into anything.
I
You
think
know,
someone like that's a good example. Even someone like Jack Kirby is a good example. You know, I can't remember where I heard it, but I've heard it several times. Someone interviewing Jack going, because when he did, well, almost his entire career, but that guy's doing 4 or 5 books a month.
right, right.
And they're like, "Why are you doing all this material?" And his answer was, "I got kids.
Need the work.
I need the work." This is a time before royalties, and even, guys, the royalty structure now, if we're talking big two, is not what it was in the 90s. So don't think that
Yep.
you're going to get those Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Tom McFarlane royalty numbers. Those don't exist anymore. They saw what they were paying out, and they still have royalty systems, but it's not that.
Yeah.
Um, but Jack was like, I had to work. So keep that in mind as a small creator. And some of you might like this, but for me, I don't want to spend 20 hours a day chained to my desk drawing. I just don't.
Every hour I spend at the drawing table, I want it to be because I want to be there.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, like, as soon as I just, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore today,
Right.
that's not what I mean, because a recent cartoonist kayfabe at Piscor is talking about his blue collar approach to his process and what he's doing. He's like, yeah, I think you got to stay real blue collar with that stuff. And for him, the structure of the, setting your expectations. So, but I want, and I know he made it clear that he wants that. And
Oh yeah.
that's how he's productive.
Yeah.
Well,
and and I'll be on, when I was a kid, uh that's what I wanted too. There is something that seemed I don't know, just something magical about having to like beat that deadline. And I would imagine, those nights where like, oh, I got to pull an all-nighter and I got to get this issue done and I got to get it to the printer. I got to get it to the publisher. Or, I was really interested in newspaper strips also. So that idea of that daily strip, oh, I got to get all these strips done. And and there was something appealing at the time for me to that. Now, as I've gotten older, although we talk on episodes about most of our free time, it goes to creating whatever we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
But there is more to life.
No, yeah.
And I still like a good night's sleep. I still like to veg out on the couch. I like to hang out with my family. And so I'm not going to give myself a hard time about not getting that stuff done. So all right, so let's keep talking about some of the things we don't think about when it comes to actually having to make a living at this, and some of the disadvantages. So right there, Jack Kirby, he, like I said, he's spending maybe 12 hours a day down in that basement on that famous drawing board. If you've never seen it, draw, pencil and page after page after page to pay the bills.
That's right.
And not necessarily, I mean, obviously he loved it. Obviously he's a master of the craft, but to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
In this environment that we have now, so let's say you're an independent creator. Let's say you've actually gotten to the point where you are making a living through your independent creation. That's awesome. That's great. That's like amazing for you. Let's think about some of the stresses with that, though. You've probably got a team of one. It's probably just you. If you're selling enough to sustain a living, that means you're sending out packages, or maybe you're going through Diamond or a distributor, but it's probably a mixture of the two.
No, without
I think a lot of independent creators that, they might be going through Diamond at first, but where's a lot of publishing starting now? It's starting on Kickstarter. And they have some fulfillment places that you can use, but that's going to cut into your profits. So a lot of people are still doing it themselves. That's a crap ton of work. So now you're sending out a ton of packages and you're not working on your creation. And so then you've got to think, okay, I'm sending out these packages, but I got to keep this going because that project is only going to go so long. It's probably not going to sustain you for the rest of your life. Maybe that project was good enough to get you a year. Maybe that's your income for a year if you're lucky. Maybe it's just a few months. So now what are you going to do in a few months? Do you have another freelance job that you're working on? Do you have another book ready to go for another Kickstarter?
Right.
That's the stress of, I would say, most independent creators. And
Yeah.
some people might like that. They might much prefer doing that than going to a day job and then doing it on the side. But that's a lot of hustling. That's a lot of where is my next meal coming from?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also that's a ton of planning. That's a lot of planning that people with a normal job, and I'm just saying normal as you are guaranteed an income
Mm-hmm.
job, because even if you have a successful Kickstarter, let's say you make $50,000 on your Kickstarter. If I had $50,000, I could live on that for a year. I know I could,
No.
but I'd have to live on it for a year. So you're getting this large lump sum, and then you've got to be responsible enough to know I have to break this into chunks. I have
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that I've got this for this month. I've got this for this month. You know, that's that's incredibly stressful. Other than, I go to a job, I get my paycheck, I know how to balance on a month to month basis.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I should have looked into this a little bit more, but I saw something on some social media site the last few days regarding Patreon. And I think there was a fairly big glitch in Patreon.
Yeah. Yeah. Something about like about a bank, switching banks. They switch
Yeah.
banks.
So something happened.
Yeah. I think
So
I think Chris Comic Tropes put some kind of post out about that. I
yeah.
think I think that's where I saw it.
So think about the amount of creators that are maybe making a living from their Patreon, which a lot of people do now. That's kind of the go-to. How can I get the closest to a normal, here's your salary kind of job? That's the appeal of Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And then something like this happens.
Yeah.
And from the post I read, it was actually not from someone who's on Patreon. It was from someone who was trying to get his Patreon subscriptions back. And it was hard for him to
Oh, I
start
got
supporting the creators. So imagine you're in this situation where you're making a living, everything's going fine, and you've got those Patreon subscribers, and then all of a sudden a glitch happens,
you. Mm-hmm.
and maybe you lose half of those. Maybe
Well,
you,
yeah,
maybe losing a third of those.
because they're all not
How do
going to
you?
come back.
No,
You
no.
know that
And
oh
and
shit,
I've been
okay.
on Patreon. Almost every patron I've ever lost on Patreon, and I don't push it a whole lot right now, but almost every patron I've lost on Patreon is because their card information changed
Yep.
and they just didn't put it back on there. And
Mm.
I totally get that. That's a normal human, like, I mean, I'd probably do the same thing, you know. So that's all. uh, To me, that just sounds incredibly stressful,
No,
you
yeah,
know.
and also when you're thinking about that, you're depending on your income based on and you could argue it's not different than any other small business. Like if you had a food truck,
Sure.
you're depending on people to keep buying your food. But when you're looking at things like a Patreon, YouTube, to be part of your revenue, to be revenue streams to support you to make the transition to full time, obviously sales are a big part of that, Kickstarters and the like, but it's always dependent on somebody saying, okay, here's my 5, 10, $20 for what you're doing, which can,
Mhm.
using myself for an example, I buy comics regularly, but I don't buy every single issue all the time. And sometimes if there's a long enough span, I feel like I'm out of the story, I just don't bother.
Yep.
Um, and it's not because I'm dissatisfied with the product or, you know, times are tight and sometimes that happens. But
Yeah.
but that's
I
what,
mean, I
depending
love,
on.
I've mentioned I love Jeff Smith's Bone.
Mhm.
Um, and I picked up the first few issues of Razzle, which was his series after that. It was completely different. I still enjoyed it. Um, but it didn't hit me like Bone did.
Yeah.
Um, and although I still want it, and by this point, we're it's been done. It's been done for 10 years or something like that. It looks great. It's a story I'm interested in. I'd like to go back and read it, but honestly, I don't have it.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't contribute to his latest Kickstarter a year or two ago when he was doing Tukey. Um, and it wasn't because I didn't want it. It's just because financially it just wasn't there for me right then.
Mhm.
Um, and so that, yeah. So when you're in that situation, you're relying on those people to kind of come through for you.
Yeah. And
You know?
here's the other side of that coin. Okay, let's say you are making money at comics now, whether you're working for somebody else or you have your own creation that is out there floating, as it were. How much do you think that is? If you want to put it in terms of salary, once you've cleared your expenses, what is the expectation the average cartoonist or aspiring cartoonist, our peers or whatever, what is that paycheck looking like? I can tell you from video games, you know, that it's not a hell of a lot more, if even equal to what I can do in a brewery. And the fact is, I'm late to the game. Decided, hey, I wanted to go that route and check it out and learn about it and build those skills. That's all well and good. Entry level jobs in those industries, you know, I've got a family, I got my stuff I have to take care of, and it's just not there.
Yeah.
If I was alone striking out, that could work. But
Well,
but I wouldn't be living in one of these downtown lofts,
no.
you know, or
Well, and that's
on that.
and I think too that's a big thing though. What you're saying, for people like us, and not everybody's going to be like us, but what we want to do is we want to create what we want to create.
Mm-hmm.
And with that does come a little bit of sacrifice. Um, some artists, and I've met a lot of artists like this, they just want to draw. They don't care what they're drawing. They just want to draw. They just, so they can go work for a video game, or they can go work in animation, or they can go do commercial design,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter. But for us working in comics, talking about indie creators that for the most part work in a team of one or maybe two, uh we want to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
And the more you step out of that, the more you're going to have to do stuff that you don't want to do. So let's talk about that. I feel like that's a good segue going into what's great about doing that, about being small,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote small. And when I say small, I'm what I mean is, you don't have the audience, you're not making a living from it. This is a hobby for hopefully profit.
Yeah.
So the biggest advantage is you can do whatever you want. You have the freedom. And so let's say you're working on a series and you're just not having any fun working on the series.
Mm-hmm.
You can quit. You can
Yeah.
quit the series.
And it's not going to impact
And it's not going to
your
impact
your family. It's not going to
you. No.
impact your, you know,
So
uh,
let's yeah. So let's
your
think
bottom
about
line.
yeah. So let's think about someone. We'll just keep saying Jeff Smith. Why not? We'll keep talking about Jeff Smith.
Well, make sure to hashtag Jeff Smith in this.
Well, so when he was putting out Bone, uh, except for a small period where he went to Image for a little while, um, he was putting that out through Cartoon Books, which is his company. That was his living.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have another job. to my knowledge, he wasn't doing any sort of freelance stuff. Maybe he did some speaking gigs or something like that. I don't know. I don't, but
Yeah.
his main source of income was Bone. If he quit Bone halfway through, that goes away. Eventually those sales go away. He doesn't get a deal with Scholastic. He doesn't get
Right.
that one volume that is now a perennial. I mean, that book is always going to be in print, I think.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't have the luxury to just quit that series at that point, because that is how he's making a living.
Right.
So imagine being into this 1,300 page epic and making a living from it, and you get halfway through and you realize, oh my God, this is not what I want to do. Still got another 600 pages to go. And you think that doesn't happen? Oh, it absolutely fucking happens.
Yep.
And then you're stuck. You're stuck trying to make this, or you don't make it and then you let everybody down, and then it's over.
Mm-hmm.
But I've quit stories because I just lost the passion in it. Or I didn't know where it was going to go. Usually it's the passion though. It's not I don't know where it's going to go. It's like something just clicks to where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. And we've talked about consistency some, and that's going to hurt my consistency, but overall in my life, and it doesn't really affect me.
Yeah.
And I can quit that and I can go to something else. That's a huge freedom for people. That's a huge freedom that I don't think small creators realize that some of the bigger ones are jealous of. And I've talked to professional cartoonists that go, oh man, I wish I could just put out a mini comic or something like that. I've heard that from their mouths. You know why they can't? Because they don't have the time, because
Right.
they have to make a living for their family doing this other stuff. So there is a huge luxury to that. So doing whatever you want, you can switch series if
Mm-hmm.
it's not working. And maybe here's the thing, maybe that is something where you look at it and you go, I'm not getting the audience that I want. Something's not clicking.
Yep.
Maybe I try something new.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you already have no audience, what's
Yeah.
it going to matter?
Yeah. You're not gonna alienate
Yeah.
anybody,
No.
disappoint anybody, break down credibility or
No.
reputation. You just do the next thing, and you can always come back to that original idea. When you feel like you're stoked about it again.
Yeah.
That can happen too.
Right.
It's almost like low risk investing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't yield giant results, but it's kind of a sure thing that you don't have to worry about. You just let it ride, you know.
Right. And
But
I've mentioned before, doing your work for an audience of one,
mhm.
and that's you. And I feel if you're doing it for you, you're putting a certain amount of passion into that project because it's for you.
Mhm.
And by doing that, hopefully that will shine through and you'll start building an audience.
No, yeah. You know, to go back to that band episode that we did, my band, we do the kind of hardcore band that we all like, that the style that we like the best. So we try to be the band that we would want to hear and see.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, because we're doing it to, you know, please ourselves or whatever, that shines through and it connects with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you say, so do if you're doing your comic, do the comic that you want to read, and that'll
Yeah.
come through. That'll come through the
Otherwise,
page.
otherwise, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
What's the point?
And it's kind of like I said, another time too, like the job I would want of course, this is not to say I would ever turn down work if it was offered, but the job I want in, major comics doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So, I'm my heart is happy doing what I'm doing.
Well, and let me, so I can't remember the time frame, but it was years ago. But years ago, I ended up getting two fairly decent freelance jobs back to back. I think they might have even been going at the same time almost. Um, and it ended up being enough money to where it paid for our Christmas
Mhm.
that year. And I started going, oh man,
Subsidized Santa.
yeah. And so I started going, well, maybe this is what I do now, you know.
Mhm.
And in fact, I got a third offer not long after I completed both of those projects. Now when I sent them the estimate for what they wanted, it fell through. Um,
Funny how that
but,
tends to happen.
well, I think a lot of people don't realize the time and work that goes into comics,
Mhm.
and it was fine. I don't know what they wanted to pay. I didn't ask them because I wasn't going to play the negotiation thing at that point.
Yeah.
Um, but and I've done freelance jobs since then. It's not like it's dried up, but I don't seek them out. They always, 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 always fall on my lap. Um, and uh, but going back to our initial part of this conversation, it didn't mean it was forever. I got
Oh
these
yeah.
three jobs. It For whatever reason, back to back, whatever I was doing was hitting with people, and it worked out, and it was great. And then it dried up,
Hmm. As it
and
will
I talk
tend to
to
do.
freelance artists all the time who do it for a living, who go, happens all the time.
Yep.
You gotta and these are people that seek it out, of course, because it's how they're making their living. But they say you got to get that really good job that's going to get you through
Yep.
a few months, and hope that you get another one that so you can keep building this little nest egg and stuff like that.
Right.
um,
Right.
but it's never guaranteed.
No.
So there's a lot of comfort, and that's really what we're driving at. You got to do what's comfortable.
Hmm.
And sure, I would love for my stuff to you know pick up in sales and sell a bunch of stuff and be able to make a living at this. I don't think I'd sleep any easier. I think I'd still be like, oh my god, I could go away at any second.
No,
um
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, lucky for me, I'm at a point in my life where, what we need is right here, and that's easy enough to get. So if I were to step away from the daily grind because I had the opportunity to spend a year or two pushing this, it wouldn't be
mm,
that hard for me to step back into basically where I left.
yeah.
So and that's kind of like my whole kind of thing. Um,
Mhm.
and this you know, if it gets to that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. I just let's have fun with your art.
Yep.
You got to have fun. don't
Yeah.
worry about don't worry about your audience. Revel in being small. There's nothing wrong with it. And like I just said, there's a ton of advantages to it. You know,
Hmm.
and hey, maybe you'll be that lucky one. Maybe you'll be that lucky one that'll hit, and somehow that all of a sudden all their problems have gone away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just enjoy what you got. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
Because being able to be on your game and to continue, I've said it a thousand times, in the last couple of years. I'm glad I'm doing it now. I'm glad I'm putting the work in now as opposed to when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because, in 1992, when I was 18, just out of high school, if I'd have put this work in like I'm doing now, there's a good chance I could have got scooped up, you know, um, by somebody, not star level, but I could have definitely, worked in someone's studio. And that would have
Mhm.
been a fun couple years. And then the bottom would have dropped out of
Right.
comics altogether.
Yep.
And, like many, many, many others, I may have never come back.
No, and I think there's really something to be said about finding success later in life, because you know what you had to do to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at people that have hit it early, um maybe they didn't appreciate what they had. And I think there's plenty of stories, maybe more in music than in
Oh, yeah.
comics. But you can look at all those stories of people that hit it big in their 20s
Yep.
and squandered it.
Oh, yeah. You hear about certain artists nowadays, like staying on musicians. And like, oh, yeah, that person had to go and be an EMT. You're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The biggest rock star, one of the biggest of the 80s, is working as an EMT now,
Yep.
um, or for however briefly that occurred. Uh,
That's another. I was listening to a podcast with some web cartoonists, and they were getting this. It was an old one. It was an old episode, and this was years ago. Um, but they were talking about the fear at that time. This was pre Patreon, and this is when a lot of web cartoonists were making their money on advertising online. And so the whole thing there was get people to your website, get people to your website. You want
yeah,
you want tons of page views, tons of page views. Well, we know what happened. Ad blockers happened. And when
yeah,
ad blockers happened, those all that ad revenue that they were getting got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to now there's no point in putting ads on your site ever. You're not gonna the Google AdSense money, let me tell you, was never super awesome to begin with. And it required a ton of page views, millions of page views to
no, yeah,
really make it worth it. Um, but they were talking about, um, you know, what do I do if this goes away? So these are people that, had made it. And now after making it, are looking at something dropping out
mm-hmm,
and going, well, what do we do? We literally, our skill set is drawing comics.
yep,
That's what we do. What do I do once this goes away?
mm-hmm,
And they were freaking out. Luckily, Patreon came along and they had good enough audience and they started doing that, and they're doing okay. But like I mentioned before, now we've had this glitch in Patreon. All of these, and this happens in other industries and stuff like that.
oh, sure.
We want to point out, the grass is not always, it's not always greener.
Right, right, and certainly I mean, practice like you want to play,
Sure.
dress for the job you want, metaphorically, fake it till you make it, you know, all those things. Take it seriously, act like, you've got Jim Shooter over your shoulder asking, where the next page is. If that's what motivates you to keep pushing it out and working at the level that you need the output.
Yep.
Elevate yourself, but never forget, kind of where you are,
Yep.
what you are doing.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah.
Well, I got nothing else to say about
Well,
this, Levi.
well, yeah, just one more thing on staying small, to put a band metaphor on it.
I said I'm
Also,
done.
also, if you only book your you know, if you book yourself in like phone booths, you're gonna sell out every time, and at least you'll have that. So
Yeah.
apply that to comics, however that works.
Okay.
You know,
I get it.
I'm only printing 3 copies, selling out every time.
Hey, you know what? There's a thing in Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics where he talks about figuring out what do you want your audience to be. Do
Hmm.
you just want to print up 10 copies of your mini comic and give it to your friends? If
Yep.
that's all you want, guess
Boom.
what? You got it.
You're ruling.
So
All right, do the damn thing, bud.